I would like to also, I have another camera set up here, if I can get it to work. I'd like to kind of diagram this for you in kind of a flow chart sort of way. So over here we're going to have, this is your body. We're going to be following the path of blood throughout, like in relation to the heart and the lungs. So from your body, the blood loses its oxygen, so it's going to be symbolized with blue, and it is going to go to the right atrium. From there, it goes to the right ventricle. And from there, it is pumped to the lungs. Now, at the lungs, it picks up oxygen. So I'm going to start using red, because it gets oxygen. And it'll go into the left atrium. Then to the left ventricle. And from there, it'll go to the body. And when it gets to wherever its destination is in the body, it will release its oxygen at the cells, transfer it over to the cells, and it'll become oxygen poor blood then, and it'll continue the cycle. It'll become blue in our diagrams and go back to the heart, then to the lungs, back to the heart, back to the body. So the pattern is going to be body, heart, lungs, heart, body, heart, lungs, heart, body. It always hits the heart when it goes between the body or the lungs in either direction. Okay, so this would be a good little chart to write down for yourself. It'll help you to understand the whole flow of blood through your heart and lungs and body and kind of make sense of everything. Okay, back to our slideshow then. Alright, so blood vessels. We have lots of blood vessels in us. There are these little tubes that carry blood. They're little pipes, and they can get very, very little, in fact. We have two different kinds of blood vessels that you will hear about. You will hear about arteries, and you'll hear about veins. The difference between an artery and a vein is that arteries carry blood away from the heart, and they're usually oxygen-rich blood, and veins will carry blood back to the heart, and so they're usually oxygen-poor blood traveling through veins. The only exception to this are your pulmonary artery and pulmonary veins, which are the ones that go from your heart to your lungs or from your lungs to your heart. Because when the blood leaves the heart to go to the lungs, it is going through an artery because it's going away from the heart, but it is going to be oxygen poor because it hasn't yet hit the lungs. And then same thing with the veins going from the lungs back to the heart. It is a vein because it's going to the heart, but it is oxygen rich because it just left the lungs. So that's the only exception to the artery and vein rule. But normally artery carries oxygen-rich blood, and veins carry oxygen-poor blood. And that's why I even color-coded them with red and blue. But there's a third type of blood vessel you should know about, and that are capillaries. And I made the word capillaries small because they are very small. So you can kind of think of your veins as a branching tree. As you get kind of like, say, towards your fingertips, as you go farther and farther out into your body, the arteries are going to get smaller and smaller and smaller and branch, and eventually you get this tiny little area where you get these capillaries, and that's actually where the exchange happens between the cells and the blood vessels. So that's where you're going to lose the oxygen, take on the carbon dioxide and water and waste and all that, and then it turns into a vein. So arteries and veins connect at capillaries, and I've got a picture of that for you here. So if you see, you have blood coming from the artery. Don't worry about what an arteriole is, you don't need to know that. But then it branches into these tiny, tiny, tiny little blood vessels that are the capillaries, and that's where the exchange actually happens, and it becomes oxygen poor then, and it goes back to the veins, and it'll go back to the heart then. So, You've probably heard about this when you go to the doctor and they put that little thing around your arm and they squeeze it tighter and tighter and tighter and it feels funny. This is blood pressure. When you have blood being forcefully pumped through your blood vessels, they're going to exert pressure, so they're kind of going to push up against the walls of your arteries and veins. And actually your arteries get a good deal more pressure than the veins do because they're coming right from that forceful pump from the heart. So your arteries are actually going to be a little more thick than your veins. But anyways, blood pressure, you don't want the blood to exert too much pressure or too little pressure on your walls of your blood vessels. And that's where you hear about some people talk about, oh, I have too high of blood pressure, I have too low of blood pressure, and different activities or stress or foods can affect your blood pressure. But it's usually written as two numbers. It's one number over another number, so you might hear like 120 over 80 or something like that. And basically the top number, the number that's over the other one, is the pressure in the arteries right when the heart contracts. So when the heart is squeezing, that's when it's going to be at its highest, and that's what that top number is. The bottom number is when the heart relaxes and it's not pumping. That's going to be your lower number. So that's the least amount of pressure you're going to have. So you kind of have the high range and the low range on your arteries. Now, if you want to learn a fun word, sphygmomanometer is the device that they actually use to measure blood pressure. So that's the squeezy thing that makes your arm feel funny. A sphygmomanometer. So tonight at dinner, if you just happen to steer the conversation toward blood pressure, you can say, oh, I know what that device is called. It's a sphygmomanometer. It's a good word. Okay. One more thought for you guys are blood types. You hear about donating blood lots. Sometimes you have little trucks that go around and take people's blood, and then you can donate it to people if they ever lose blood or they need more blood or a transfusion or anything like that. It's a very good thing in the medical field to have blood on hand that you can give to someone who might die if they don't get it. But we have to be careful about the blood that you give to someone else, because if you give the wrong kind of blood to somebody, it could have very bad consequences for them. So your blood cells have what are called antigens on the surface of the cells. And we'll learn more about antigens when we talk about the immune system. But basically, they're usually these little proteins, or there's something on the outside of the cell that your body can kind of recognize. Your immune system recognize it. And human blood cells, for our purposes right now, have two different kinds of antigens that could be on the outside. You could have A or B. And in our pictures here, the A antigen is little triangles, and the B is little circles. And your blood cells can either have no antigens on them, which would make it an O-type blood, just the A antigen, which makes it an A-type, just the B antigen, which would make it the B-type, or the both A and B, which would make it the AB type. Now, when your body sees an antigen that it's not used to, it gets unhappy, and your immune system will attack it in an effort to protect you, because for all it knows, there's some foreign substance inside your bloodstream and it wants to get rid of it and save your life. So if you have type A blood, but then suddenly this type B blood starts showing up that has this antigen that your body's not used to, then your immune system is going to attack that B antigen, so it's going to attack those red blood cells. But if you're an A-type blood and there's more A-type blood that's put in, it's not going to affect you. It's just going to seem like normal. So there's a little chart down here on the bottom of this slide that shows you what types of blood donors can donate and receive blood from other types. The O-type can be donated to anybody because it doesn't have antigens, so it's not going to upset any of the new bodies that it goes into. It's kind of hidden. There's nothing to make it stand out or seem abnormal because it doesn't have A or B. But AB, on the other hand, it has both antigens, so it's going to make a lot of different types unhappy. If your blood type is O, your body is going to be unhappy when it sees AB because it has all these foreign antigens. If your type is A, you're going to see a B antigen over on the AB blood. If your type is B, you're going to see an A antigen on the AB blood. So an AB type can only donate to an AB type because that's the only type of body that's used to seeing both of those antigens. So it's just a good thing to know, and this will kind of prep us for the immune system notes that we're going to have here coming up. So that is the end of this slideshow here. One more thing I want to do before I close off for right now is I want to go over the answers to that worksheet that I gave to you the day I wasn't here, so a Friday a week ago. I'm recording this on a Friday, so it was a week ago today for me. So let me bring that up here. I'm just going to quickly talk through them. I think I answered most of these in my lecture right now, but it would be a good idea just to talk about it. So first one, what is blood? Blood is the fluid that is in your circulatory system, and it transports materials throughout your body. So it transports oxygen and carbon dioxide and water and sugars and all sorts of stuff. So it's the main transport fluid of your circulatory system. Now the four chambers of the heart, and what do they do? So you have left atrium, right atrium, left ventricle, and right ventricle. Those are the four different chambers. So blood will enter the heart from the body into the right atrium. Then it'll be pumped to the lungs by the right ventricle. Then it'll come back to the heart from the lungs into the left atrium, and then the left ventricle will pump it to the rest of the body. So those are the four, and that's what they do. Now, each of the following parts of your blood, what do they do? So white blood cells, those are your immune cells. They attack germs and pathogens and bad things that you don't want in you. Red blood cells carry oxygen throughout your circulatory system. Platelets, they form blood clots when a blood vessel is damaged to stop you from bleeding out. Plasma is the liquid that everything is in, and it dissolves some important substances that your body needs. What is the difference between arteries and veins? Arteries carry blood away from the heart, and veins carry blood back towards the heart. And you might want to add that arteries are usually oxygen-rich, and veins are usually oxygen-poor, except in the case of between the lungs and the heart. What are capillaries? Capillaries are the tiny branches that connect arteries and veins, and that's where the exchange of oxygen and waste and all that stuff happens. So that's where the blood actually kind of talks to the cells and gives stuff to them and gets it back. What blood types can type O blood be donated to? What types of blood can a type O receive? A type O can be donated to anybody because it doesn't have any antigens, so those antigens aren't going to upset any other immune system. But the type O can only receive type O because any antigen, A or B or AB, is going to upset the type O. Typo, that's what it sounds like. Anyways, speaking of typos, there was a typo in the worksheet before. I think I had an extra P in the word plasma, but I'm pretty sure you're able to read through that. And actually, speaking of plasma, I think you guys might know this. I used to work as a scientist developing drugs and medicines and such. And I sometimes worked with human blood, and sometimes we would work with just the plasma. What we'd actually do is we would centrifuge blood, and basically that it puts blood under like higher gravity than it would normally have. So it causes all the blood cells to fall down to the bottom, and you get this kind of yellowish liquid, and that's the blood plasma. Kind of cool. So I spent a lot of time dealing with that sort of stuff. But we are at the end of this video lecture for right now. So I hope that you guys are all doing well, and if you ever have any questions, feel free to email me, or we might have some other ways to communicate coming here in the next few days. Stay tuned for all of that. But